Vivian Cole was just pulling out her chair when Stephanie's heel slammed into it, dragging it away so Vivian almost fell. Laughter burst around the table like fireworks. "Go to the kitchen," Stephanie said, her voice sharp and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Adopted children don't eat with a real family." Fawkes paused. Then the laughter grew, harsh and ugly. Vivian didn't cry. She didn't beg. Slowly, she pushed the chair back in, turned around, and walked to where her purse rested by the wall. Her hands were steady as she pulled out a thick brown envelope she had been carrying for weeks. She walked back and placed it carefully in the middle of the table on top of the white tablecloth. The room went quiet. "Mum and Dad left me this," she said softly. "Call your lawyers. We'll finish this tomorrow." Every smile at the table died like someone had switched off the lights. Shock filled the room. Fear followed. Vivian stood there, calm in a way she did not even recognize in herself. For most of her life, she had tried to believe that being the adopted child in the Cole family did not matter. Vivian's adoptive parents, Peter and Linda Cole, never made her feel different. From the day they brought her home, they called her "our girl." Peter helped her with school projects, sat proudly in the front row at every event, and shouted the loudest when she got awards. Linda brushed her hair, taught her recipes, and whispered, "You are our daughter in every way that matters." Their 3 biological children, however, told a different story. Stephanie, the oldest, always found a way to push Vivian to the edge of things, edge of the couch, edge of group photos, edge of every conversation. Mark, the only son, joked, "Relax, Viv. No one can tell you not one of us, if they don't look too hard." Jenna, the middle sister, mastered the fake kind smile that hid sharp words. She would say, "We love you, of course," then later tell friends, "Vivian is different." The cuts were small, but they were constant. Vivian learned to swallow the pain and tell herself she was lucky just to belong at all. What kept her from breaking was simple. Peter and Linda's love felt real, solid, and safe. Everything changed in the 6 months that followed. First Linda fell sick, then Peter. One doctor visit became many. Hospital appointments became normal. Without thinking twice, Vivian moved back into her parents' house. She slept in stiff plastic chairs, talked to doctors, signed forms, and handled bills that seemed to grow every week. Her husband, Daniel, stayed home with their 2 children, Amy and Leo. Over the phone, his voice was steady. "Do what you need to do," he told her. "I've got the kids. I've got us." While Vivian divided herself between hospital rooms and worry, her siblings offered excuses. Mark said, "I can't risk getting sick. My job at the bank is too important." Jenna said, "The twins need me. You know how busy it is with toddlers." Stephanie simply said, "I can't handle seeing them like that. It's too much for me." So it was Vivian who held Linda's hand when she struggled to breathe, Vivian who wiped Peter's forehead and said, "I'm here, Dad." Even when she knew they both were running out of time. She was there when they slipped away, one after the other, days apart. The funerals were a blur of flowers, speeches, and fake tears. Suddenly, Stephanie cried the loudest. Mark stood with his arm around Linda's sister, talking about how much he missed them already. Jenna posted long dramatic messages online about how her parents had been her rock. Vivian watched them move like actors on a stage. After the second funeral, as everyone gathered in Stephanie's living room, Stephanie cleared her throat and stood up straight. "I want to host a family dinner to honor Mum and Dad," she said, her voice smooth and controlled. "Just us and our spouses. No outsiders." She smiled directly at Vivian. "Vivian, you handle the cooking. You are always best at Mum's recipes." Mark nodded like they were in a meeting. "And maybe bring that bread from the bakery near your house." "Mum loved it," Jenna added. Vivian felt something twist in her chest. They were assigning her roles like she was staff. Still, grief can make people hope for things they shouldn't. She told herself, maybe this is a chance to fix things. Maybe losing Mum and Dad softened them. Against her better judgment, she agreed. For 3 days, Vivian cooked. She made roast chicken the way Linda loved it, prepared apple cinnamon sauce the way Peter asked for every birthday, and baked pies that filled her small kitchen with warm smells. She even bought a bottle of good wine she could barely afford. As she packed the food into containers, Amy hugged her waist. "Will they be nice this time, Mum?" the little girl asked. Vivian forced a smile. "We'll see, sweetheart." Daniel caught her eyes over Amy's head and squeezed her shoulder gently. "Remember," he said quietly, You don't have to prove anything to them. That evening, Vivian arrived at Stephanie's big, spotless house. The air smelled of expensive candles, not family. The moment she stepped inside, she felt it, a stiffness under the polite greetings, a quiet heaviness in the room. Stephanie's smile was tight. "Vivian, you're early," she said, walking over like a hostess greeting a worker. "I wanted to help set up," Vivian replied. "You've already done plenty," Stephanie answered. Her eyes flicked to the containers in Vivian's hands. "Just put everything in the kitchen. We'll handle the rest." That "we" did not include Vivian. As Vivian walked past the dining room, she paused. The long table was set with Linda's old china, the plates Stephanie had insisted on keeping for sentimental reasons. Soft music played. Candles flickered. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, like a magazine picture. As Vivian headed to the kitchen, she heard voices from the hallway. Mark's low tone, then Jenna's, then a sudden silence. When they reappeared, their faces were smooth, almost too smooth. "Everything okay?" Vivian asked lightly. "Of course," Jenna said quickly. "Just talking about the kids." Vivian unpacked the dishes in the kitchen, lining them carefully on the counter. The ache in her chest returned, the same ache she'd felt as a child when she heard laughter behind closed doors and knew they were having family time without her. She remembered being 11, bringing a plate of cookies onto the porch. "Want one?" she'd asked. They took one each, smiled, and waited until she walked away. Then she had heard Stephanie whisper, "She tries too hard." They laughed then the same way they laughed before telling her, adopted children don't eat with real family. Some wounds never truly close. Vivian checked the time. 15 minutes to dinner. She smoothed her dress, took a slow breath, and stepped back into the living room. Everyone was there now. Stephanie and Jenna stood near the window, talking in hushed tones that stopped the moment Vivian appeared. Mark adjusted his cufflinks and stared at the floor, as if guilt itself were pulling his head down. Vivian tried to lighten the mood. "I brought Mum's apple pie too," she said. "The one she taught me." Stephanie didn't miss a beat. "Perfect. You can serve it later." "Serve it. Not share it. Not eat with us. Serve it." Vivian swallowed the sting and sat down at the only empty chair, the one at the far end of the table, away from the head seat where Linda used to sit and where Stephanie now placed herself. Dinner began quietly. Mark talked about a new promotion at the bank. Jenna spoke about her twins. Like she was reading a script. Stephanie smiled and told stories about Linda's garden, leaving out the fact that Vivian had been the one watering the plants. Every word felt rehearsed, every smile stretched thin. Vivian carried each dish from the kitchen and placed it on the table. The others barely moved their chairs to make space. No one stood to help. "Vivian, could you pour the wine?" Stephanie asked sweetly once Vivian sat down. Vivian did it without speaking, her hands steady even as anger rose inside her. For a while, they ate in false peace. Then Mark cleared his throat in that same superior way he used in school debates. "Since we're all here," he began, "we should talk about the house." Stephanie nodded, setting down her fork carefully. "And Mum's jewelry. There are some very valuable pieces. We should be organized about everything." Jenna added, "And the investments. It's better if they stay in the bloodline." Vivian's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "The bloodline," she repeated quietly. Stephanie leaned forward, her voice soft but sharp. "We just want to be practical, Vivian. I'm sure you understand." Jenna put on her sympathetic face. "Mum and Dad loved you, of course. But legally, inheritance usually goes to biological children. It's just how families work." The words hit Vivian like ice water. "What exactly are you saying?" Vivian asked, her voice calm but cold. Jenna sighed as if this were painful for her. "We're not cutting you out," she said. "You can keep sentimental things. A photo or two. Maybe some of Mum's books." Stephanie continued, "But the house, the accounts, the serious things, it's only fair that the majority stays where it belongs." Belongs. The word echoed in Vivian's head. Something inside her, a last soft hope, snapped. The room seemed to tilt slightly, but her face stayed still. She placed her fork down carefully and pushed her chair back. Mark raised an eyebrow. Jenna bit her lip. Stephanie's smirk faltered just a little. Without a word, Vivian stood and walked toward the kitchen. They probably thought she was going to cry. Maybe they expected her to return with desserts and a shaky apology. Instead, she went straight to her purse. Her fingers closed around the thick envelope, the one Linda had pressed into her hands days before she slipped into unconsciousness. The one Peter had signed with shaking hands. Vivian turned and walked back into the dining room, something fierce and steady in her chest. "Vivian, where are you going?" Stephanie asked, her voice suddenly less confident. Vivian didn't answer. She stepped to the center of the table, between the plates and the wine glasses, and placed the envelope down with a soft but powerful thud. The sound cut through the room like a bell. "What's that?" Mark asked, his voice tightening. Vivian looked at each of them slowly. Stephanie with her perfect hair, Mark with his expensive watch, Jenna with her trembling hands. "Mum and Dad left me this," she said quietly. "Call your lawyers. We'll talk properly tomorrow." For a second, no one moved. Then she saw it. Panic. Real, raw panic. Mark's face drained of color. Jenna gripped her wine glass so hard Vivian thought it might shatter. Stephanie's smile froze, then cracked at the edges. "Vivian," she whispered, "what did you do?" Vivian leaned forward just a little. "What you pushed me to do." She picked up her purse, turned around, and walked out of the house without another word. Their shocked silence followed her like smoke. The next morning, she would walk into a law office with Daniel at her side, and nothing in the Cole family would ever be the same again. The next morning, the city felt too bright for what Vivian knew was coming. She had barely slept. All night she replayed the dinner in her mind, the insult about real family, the envelope's dull thud on the table, the fear flooding her siblings' faces. Daniel drove her to the law office, his hand resting over hers on the gear stick. "You don't owe them anything," he said quietly. Vivian stared out the window. "I know," she replied. "But a part of me still wishes they had chosen differently." The law office was on a quiet street, glass windows catching the early sun. Inside, the receptionist led them to a long conference room with a dark wooden table and leather chairs. Stephanie, Mark, and Jenna were already there. Mark's wife, Claire, sat beside him in a sharp suit. Jenna's husband, Eric, had a stack of papers in front of him. Stephanie sat alone, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. No one looked at Vivian as she walked in. Daniel squeezed her shoulder before sitting beside her, silent but solid. The air felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Moments later, the lawyer walked in. He was an older man with gray hair and calm eyes. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Mr. Harris. I worked with Peter and Linda for over 20 years. He shook Daniel's hand, then nodded at Vivian with a kind look that almost made her cry. Everyone settled into their chairs. Mr. Harris closed the door, sat at the head of the table, and opened a thick folder. "We are here to review the last will and testament of Peter and Linda Cole," he began. Stephanie straightened. Mark folded his hands. Jenna chewed her lip nervously. "I also understand," Mr. Harris continued, "that Vivian presented a letter last night." He lifted a sealed document from the folder. "For the sake of clarity, I want to confirm that the letter she shared is authentic and matches the changes your parents requested 8 months ago." 8 months. Jenna repeated. "That's when they started getting worse," Stephanie said quickly. "Mr. Harris, our parents would never exclude us. There must be some confusion." "There is no confusion," he said simply, his voice firm but gentle. Mr. Harris opened the main document. The rustle of paper sounded loud in the quiet room. "The entirety of the Cole estate," he read, "including the family home, savings, investments, belongings, and all insured assets, is to be inherited by their daughter, Vivian Cole." For a moment, everything stopped. Even the soft hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Vivian heard her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. Stephanie blinked rapidly. Mark stared at Mr. Harris like he had misheard him. Jenna's mouth fell open. Mr. Harris kept reading the legal language, but nobody was listening properly anymore. All eyes slowly turned toward Vivian. Not with love. Not with understanding. With disbelief that burned into something darker. Mark spoke first, his voice sharp. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We're their biological children. They wouldn't just leave everything to—" He cut himself off, but the unfinished word hung in the air. "Huh." Claire leaned forward, professional and cold. "Would like to review medical records from the time these changes were made," she said. "There may have been diminished capacity." Mr. Harris lifted one hand. "Your parents were evaluated by 2 doctors," he said. "Both confirmed they were mentally fit when they signed these documents." Stephanie shook her head, her voice cracking. No, they wouldn't do this to us. They loved us. They loved all of us. They did, Mr. Harris replied softly. They told me that many times. But they also told me something very specific about their decision. May I share it? He looked at Vivian. She swallowed and nodded. Mr. Harris pulled out a handwritten note. They wrote, he read slowly, our children are adults with their own lives. But Vivian is the one who never left our side. Not from obligation, but from love. She took care of us when no one else would. We want to give her the security she has always given us. Jenna put her head in her hands. Mark scoffed loudly. So what? He said. She babysits them for a few months and gets everything? That's insane. Vivian felt something inside her grow hard and still. It was 6 months, Vivian said quietly. Everyone looked at her. 6 months of hospitals, forms, and sleeping in chairs. 6 months of watching them fade. Where were you? No one answered. Mark stared at the table. Jenna wiped her eyes. Stephanie pressed her lips together. Mr. Harris went on. Your parents also added a clause regarding challenges to the will. Mark leaned forward. What clause? He demanded. If any beneficiary attempts to contest the will, Mr. Harris read, they will forfeit any claim to family photos, heirlooms, personal items, or keepsakes of sentimental value. Those items will be donated instead. The reaction was instant. Stephanie's breath hitched. They give away Mum's wedding ring, she whispered. Dad's medals. Jenna asked weakly. If a challenge is filed, Mr. Harris confirmed. Jenna turned to Vivian, eyes red. Vivian, you wouldn't let that happen, right? I mean, we grew up together. Vivian looked at her slowly. Did we? She asked. Because my memories of growing up with you feel very different from yours. The room went even quieter. Mark slammed his palm on the table, making everyone jump. You can't just shut us out, he said. This is our legacy. Vivian's voice stayed calm. You shut yourselves out, she replied. You had reasons, excuses, more important things, while I was there. Eric, who had been silent all this time, cleared his throat. We're struggling financially, he said softly. The mortgage, things have been hard. This money could help. Vivian stared at him. I'm sorry you're struggling, she said. But you don't get to hurt me and then ask me to fix your life. Claire leaned toward Mr. Harris again. We could still argue undue influence, she insisted. The circumstances suggest. Mr. Harris closed the folder with a firm, final sound. You cannot argue undue influence, he said, when the beneficiary wasn't even present in the building during the revisions. Vivian was not there. The shock on their faces was almost visible in the air. For the first time, Vivian felt the ground shift under her feet, in her favor. So it's really over, Stephanie whispered. Her voice sounded small, nothing like the confident woman who had ordered Vivian to the kitchen. No, Vivian said quietly. This part is over. What happens next is up to you. Jenna looked at her with desperate eyes. What do you want from us? She asked. Vivian thought about it. She thought of childhood photos where she was barely in the frame. Of holidays spent in the kitchen while her siblings laughed in the living room. Of last night's laughter when Stephanie called her adopted, like it was an insult. I want peace, Vivian said at last. But I won't negotiate Mum and Dad's wishes. They made their choice. And so did you. Mark stood up suddenly, his chair scraping harshly. Fine, he snapped. We'll see if there's any legal angle left. Mr. Harris spoke again. There's one more thing, he said. He reached into the folder and took out a small white envelope. Your parents left a private message for Vivian. He handed it to her. Vivian's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single line in Linda's familiar handwriting. You were always ours. Now let us take care of you the way you took care of us. The words blurred as tears filled Vivian's eyes. For the first time since the funerals, she let herself feel the full weight of their love, not as something she had to earn, but as a gift freely given. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in. When she looked up, her siblings were staring at her with a mix of resentment, regret, and something close to fear. Vivian stood, smoothing her dress. I'm done here, she said. She walked toward the door. Vivian, wait, Stephanie called, her voice shaking. Vivian paused but did not turn around. Last night, Vivian said softly, you told me to go to the kitchen. But I'm done eating scraps. She opened the door and stepped out, leaving them exactly where they had kept her whole life, behind her. Outside, the air felt cooler, cleaner. Daniel stood up from his chair in the waiting area the moment he saw her. "How did it go?" he asked gently. Vivian walked straight into his arms. The tight knot in her chest finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks, quiet but unstoppable. "They left everything to me," she whispered into his shoulder. "The house, the money, all of it. And they knew exactly what my siblings were like." Daniel held her tighter. "Of course they knew," he said. "They saw who stayed." That night, after Amy and Leo were asleep, Vivian sat on the couch with Daniel and told him every detail. The insults, the letter, the will, the clause, the final message from her parents. Daniel listened without interrupting, his hand wrapped around hers. When she finished, he sighed. "They lost you long before they lost the inheritance," he said quietly. His words sank deep into her heart. She realized he was right. The real loss was not money or a house. It was the chance to be decent, and they had thrown it away. The days that followed were messy. Mark sent long angry messages, threatening to take this higher and fight until the end. Vivian stopped reading them halfway through. Jenna showed up twice at her door, eyes puffy, begging. "Please, Viv, can we at least talk? We're still sisters." Vivian stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance gently but firmly. "I forgive you," she said each time. "But forgiveness doesn't rebuild what you broke." Stephanie sent flowers and cards, writing about misunderstandings and grief making people say things they don't mean. Vivian read the first card, then put it away. She didn't write back. For the first time in her life, she did not chase them, did not bend herself into shapes to fit their idea of family. Instead, she focused on making the old coal house into a real home for Amy and Leo. She painted walls, sorted through boxes, and cried over old notes from Peter and Linda. The silence from her siblings grew louder, but so did her peace. Somewhere deep inside, space was opening for a new kind of future, one she hadn't even imagined yet. One quiet Saturday morning, while Vivian was buying groceries, she heard someone call her name softly. She turned and saw Mrs. Dalton, the social worker who had helped her parents during their final months. The older woman smiled gently. "Vivian," she said, "your mother talked about you all the time." Vivian's throat tightened, but she smiled back. Mrs. Dalton leaned closer. "I came across something recently. 2 little girls, sisters. 4 and 3. Their relatives won't take both of them, and the system might separate them." Vivian felt something inside her shift, the way it always did when she saw children who needed a home. "What will happen to them?" she asked. Mrs. Dalton sighed. "If no family steps forward soon, it won't be good." Vivian stood quietly for a moment, her hands resting on the shopping cart. She remembered Linda's handwriting, "Let us take care of you the way you took care of us." She remembered how her siblings treated her like she was alone. But she wasn't. She had Daniel. She had Amy and Leo. She had love, real love. "Can I meet them?" she asked. Mrs. Dalton's face lit up. Of course. Meeting the girls changed everything. They were small and scared, clinging to each other with wide, unsure eyes. The older one, Lily, held her sister Hazel's hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. When they saw Vivian, Lily stepped forward shyly. "Do you know where we're going?" she whispered. Vivian knelt down so she was eye level. "Not yet," she said gently. "But I promise, wherever it is, you'll be together." Hazel hid behind Lily's dress, peeking out with big brown eyes. Daniel arrived a moment later with Amy and Leo. Within minutes, Amy was showing Hazel her doll, and Leo was telling Lily about his superhero backpack. Vivian watched the 4 children sitting in a small circle on the floor, sharing snacks, laughing softly. Something opened inside her chest, warm, steady, undeniable. 2 months later, after paperwork, visits, and home studies, Lily and Hazel moved into the Cole house. Their first night there, Hazel fell asleep clutching Amy's hand, and Lily whispered, "Is this really our home now?" Vivian tucked a blanket around her and kissed her forehead. "Yes," she said. "This is your home." 1 year after the disastrous family dinner, Vivian stood on the back porch of her new home. 4 children ran across the yard, Amy laughing wildly, Leo chasing her with a toy cape flying behind him, Lily gathering dandelions, Hazel giggling as she tried to catch butterflies. Daniel stepped beside Vivian and slid an arm around her waist. The sun dipped low, casting soft light over the scene. "You built this," he whispered. Vivian shook her head. No, she said. Love built this. Choice built this. Behind her, the house was warm and full of life, nothing like the cold place she once fought to belong to. Her siblings had drifted away, their anger dissolving into silence. Vivian did not miss them. She had learned something powerful. Family was not blood, or duty, or shared last names. Family was love that showed up. Family was hands that held you when you were falling. Family was the children laughing in her backyard, the man standing by her side, and the parents who had trusted her with their last gift. Vivian watched her children run in the fading light and felt peace, real, deep peace. She was no longer the girl pushed to the kitchen. She was the woman who built a home. And this, she knew, was the ending she deserved.